Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 9x90. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Minister Tashkovich with us here today. He has held numerous international leadership roles, and I think he has the Midas touch, which you all are going to learn about today when you hear about all of the different ways that he's created economic value for various entities and government organizations around the world. You all are in for a real treat.
Thank you. Looking forward to being here.
So let's start with, you worked with Cornell on getting the internet set up.
Yes.
Can you share that story? Because so many people think it was Al Gore, but here I find you actually have the story of how it really started.
Well, I'd like to think so, but let me quickly address the Al Gore situation, because a lot of people are confused about that. That was perhaps a tragic quotation that spread too far. Senator Gore was the chairman of the committee in the Senate which legalized the internet as an entity. It was before that, it was just this amorphous thing called the internet, but there was no legal structure around it. And so when he says he created the internet, he's referring to the act of giving it a legal standing. Does that make sense?
Yes, got it. So
right.
Similar to how AI was this strange thing and we had to go through all these rounds with litigation to decide what it is today.
Perhaps, yes.
Okay. So can you walk us through what it was like to set this up?
Well, maybe I should explain how it started.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out what level of detail to go into because we only have an hour. I'll come back to how if you want me to, I'll come back to how I got to the point I'm starting at. But I think in the interest of time and the things you want to cover, I think I should start kind of halfway through the story. I had a run-in with the computer science department at Cornell over their lack of ethics in how they ran their department. And I discovered this by accident while working on the computer system one rainy afternoon. It was actually, I remember when it was early February, 1984. And I exposed it. And as a result of that, I did a 4-credit independent study on computer ethics and computer abuse policies across the country for universities, for research labs, for corporations. And so in the process of reaching out to different entities, I discovered this burgeoning thing called the internet, or maybe it wasn't called that then, but a network to which Cornell was the, I think, 4th connected node. So it was City University of New York with Yale, and then they added Penn State, and then Cornell, and then it went out from there. And you could see the message was using the network was using store and forward technologies. So you'd see the message go from link to link. It'd say sending from Cornell to Penn State, sending from Penn State to City University of New York, sending to Yale, sending to MIT, and like this. And you could watch it as the messages came up on your screen where the message had actually gone to, relative to what you wanted. And back then, we take for granted that it was like username at node name dot domain, right? So whatever email people use. But back then, you often, not always, actually, you did if you were crossing networks, because there were different networks around the country funded by different sponsors. And if you were crossing one network to another to deliver your message, you had to end up specifying at least the network gateway between the two networks. So for example, Cornell University, being a big prestigious institution, sat on many networks. And it was those prototypical Dorito eating, Diet Coke swilling, 200-pound overweight system operators at 3 a.m. who were designing the network gateways to allow people to send mail between the two networks, as opposed to Cornell just being on 5 different networks.
Okay.
Right? And so where was I going with that? So I became the first international internet answer person. So when people wanted to send mail between two different networks, I was a person people contacted around the world because I knew how to do this, and I did it for free.
Oh, wow.
So before the internet, as we know it today,
Mhm.
you had these disparate networks funded by different entities. For example, Department of Energy had ESNet. The National Science Foundation had CSNet, hooking up CS computer science departments across the country. You had the network I was referring to in the very beginning is called BitNet, which stands for because it's there, because it's time network. And so, and then you, of course, the better known example is ARPANET, the Advanced Research Project Agency's network of the Department of Defense. And then in parallel with that was MILNET, the military network. And those two, of course, existed from back in the late 60s.
Okay.
And so anyway, you had to, my point was that when you crossed a network gateway, you had to specify every intermediate site along the way. And not only that, but you had to know how often they spoke to each other. Well, that's really it. But I mean, but the point is there, most were not directly connected all the time, 24/7, which we take for granted today. They could talk to each other every 15 minutes, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every quarter, or even once a year. And you had to know the frequency between any two systems, how often they spoke, so that when you were writing the address, where you specified every intermediate site in the address could be 3 lines long, right? You had to know this. And so I kept a publicly accessible database of all the networks all around the world, changing, weekly, if not daily in some cases, as new sites came on board, to make it easy for other people to figure out what this thing looked like. And I stored them. What's that?
That's wild. Like,
yeah,
I built a software company, and I remember people being upset that the results wouldn't render fast. And I kept having to find ways to change the code so that they could ping the database faster and faster and faster. And here you are with people not being able to connect nodes for 15 minutes. Like, the internet just completely changed. Wow.
Yeah. So I convinced Dr. Ken King, who quickly became a mentor of mine and sadly passed away about 1.5 years ago in his 90s, to hire me because it would burnish Cornell's image. It would make Cornell look good if I became the internet answer person. And so I was the highest paid student on the entire campus to spend time in front of a computer helping random people connect to each other around the world. So I get queries like from Melbourne, Australia, saying, "Hey, I met this professor at a conference in Istanbul, and he's at University of Darmstadt in Germany. We want to co-author a book together, and he gave me this email address, but I can't reach it. How do I do that?" Right? And so I would show how I would do that. I'd plot out the route.
So I would just want to pause for a second, because the self-advocacy you had there, coupled with the technological know-how, is completely missing among young entrepreneurs and engineers today. A lot of young engineers today are so willing to do these huge projects for free because they're completely devalued. But you managed to communicate your value in a way that you were the highest paid student. What do you attribute that to? Is that something you learned growing up with your parents? Is that something you learned in school early on? Where did
That's
you
a really good question. And some people around me would say I've lost that talent these days. But nonetheless, I'm not really sure. It may have been that my interlocutor, the vice provost for computing services, was a really easygoing, friendly guy. I didn't have to. It wasn't a hard sell.
Okay.
And it may have just been, "Oh, hey, you think I can get paid for this?" And you go, "Sure. How much do you want?" And I'm like, "Well, how about this?" And he said, "Actually, I'll tell you what. It was probably like around $6.50 an hour, but that was a fortune for a college kid in 1984."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a very rare skill. It's a shame you don't have like something to attribute it to, because it would be great to see how the economy would change if that was something that could be packaged into a book and taught to young people.
I mean, as we discussed earlier, my parents were entrepreneurs in the real estate development sector for high-end luxury estates, and I was around that. They worked out of their home, and I was part of that 7 days a week. So whether I was going to school or something, or they were having meetings or negotiations, that was at least my reality, whether I was directly involved or not. But I probably picked some stuff up along the way.
I think you do pick up a lot along the way that you don't even realize. And there's so many times where I will be sitting in a real estate meeting where I'll think that something is obvious knowledge to everyone, and I'll provide the answer, and then they look at me and they're like, "You're decades younger than everyone else here. How did you know that?" And I was like, "Oh, well, it's obvious. I mean, I learned this when I was 12." And they're like, "No, it is not obvious." So I think that's what we can attribute it to, because I also grew up in a family office that was centered around real estate. And there's certain things even with negotiations to this day, where I'll walk into a room and I'm literally the youngest person there by decades, and I'll know how to negotiate the deal. And I walk out and one of my friends is like, "I can't believe you got them to agree to that." And I'm like, "But that's the standard." And they were like, "Who taught you that that's the standard?" It's like, well, I learned this from my parents growing up. So can we dive into the real estate story with your parents for a second? Because I think that is something that a lot of people who didn't grow up in this unique environment that we did, they're very intrigued by.
Oh, okay.
So
my parents met at Cornell University.
Okay.
My brother and I also attended, graduated from. We have 6 degrees among the 4 of us. My father's story is very interesting and very, very circuitous, I would add. My grandfather, after whom I was named but never met, was a leader of the Democratic Party, or what constituted the Democratic Party in the South Balkans during the Kingdom of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, roughly from 1925 to 1948.
No way. Oh, wow.
And he has a civil engineering firm. And he did a number of major projects like the Parliament building, aqueducts, dams, building all kinds of bridges, all kinds of things like this. And then in, I think it was 1937, he won an election to represent what was known as Macedonia to the federal parliament in Belgrade.
Okay.
And remember, Yugoslavia itself didn't start till after World War II, right? So there's this kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes.
Yeah.
And so when World War II started, he was arrested the first time by the occupying forces from Bulgaria. His followers stormed the prison and got him out. The second time.
Okay. Yeah, you can't take him. We need him. Okay.
Right. The second time, his parents, my great-grandparents, traveled from Bitola in the southern part of Macedonia near the Greek border to Sofia, Bulgaria, demanded a meeting with King Boris, the head of Bulgaria, and King Boris ordered him to be released. And the third time he was arrested, his captors didn't want him to be found. And he later told my parents he spent time in a total of 30 prisons up until the time the war ended.
Oh my gosh.
Moved, every weeks, month, however that worked. He moved often. And so when the war was over, he still had, I guess it'd be spies in the party who were outside the country and who reported on advancing troop movements of the Russians. And he gave everyone a warning that they were being, Russians were coming. And he left, went to Bulgaria, then to Istanbul, to Turkey. He was probably each place for 6 or so months or something, and then ended up in Alexandria, Egypt, where he became a broadcaster for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty into Yugoslavia. These organizations have now been challenged by the current incumbent in the White House, which is sad because they do really good work. But anyway, and so then there was a group here in New York on 42nd Street, I think it's still here, called the International Rescue Committee, the IRC. Have you heard of it before?
It sounds familiar.
The website for your listeners is rescue.org. And I think it was founded around 33, and I think it was sort of the wealthiest families in America at the time that came together. And they uh, someone realized that all these leaders of democratic opposition movements faced either lifetime imprisonment or death by firing squad for being on the wrong side of the war at the end of World War II in that part of the world. And so they identified, I don't know the exact number, let's say 40, 45 people from that war, including my grandfather, found them and brought them to America. And so I never really knew how my grandfather came to America until after my grandmother, because I never met him, until after my step-grandmother died, when I was cleaning out her New York City apartment, and I found this filing cabinet way in the back of some walk-in closet covered by clothes that, was just there.
Yeah.
I found this incredible, oversized, red, whether it was velvet or it was padded, passport cover. Red, maybe with some gold stripes on it or something like that. And I opened it up, not knowing what it was. And it was a passport issued by the Royal Kingdom of Albania and their Cairo embassy in Egypt,
Oh my God.
giving my grandfather the chance to go to America with an Albanianized last name.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'd never seen, if I'd heard about this and never seen it, I never would have believed it, ever. It would have been improbable beyond any fantasy, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's an incredible document. And so that's how he came to America. And then he remarried, and his new wife's best friend's husband, Dr. David Gravich, was a personal physician to Eleanor Roosevelt, who then was the first U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And Ambassador Roosevelt wrote a letter to Marshal Tito, the new head of state for Yugoslavia, asking for a political pardon for my father and his brothers. And that's how they came to America.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow.
And the family my grandfather married into here in America were quite famous. They had a major role to play during the Gilded Age, and every time the Museum of the City of New York has a Gilded Age style exhibit, they trot out these enormous portraits of, I don't know, great grandparents. 6 feet by 6 feet, enormous portraits, and they put them up on display. And they had a mansion on Fifth Avenue around 67th Street, now ripped down for some ugly white brick building. They were the co-founders of Bear Stearns later in the 50s, I think it was 55 or so. And they also founded Stearns department stores.
Okay.
So my father comes over, not speaking any English. The story was that there was a knock at the door in Beetle. He was being raised by his grandparents. He was 19, going on 20 years old, and maybe it was actually probably early January 1958. And there was some internal police people there saying that he had paperwork that he used to go to America, and he'd have 3 days to say his goodbyes and pack. And they put him on a KLM flight to Amsterdam and into New York. And I don't know if you've ever flown KLM before, but they have these in business class. They have these ceramic sculptures of the townhouses of Amsterdam.
Okay.
Have you seen or
searched? I haven't flown KLM in a very long time.
Okay, so they still do that even this day, decades later. They still have them. They have like 300 different kinds of houses, and we still have that house, which represents my father's flight to freedom in 1958. Oh
my gosh.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So he joins his family with, his new stepmother he'd never met. And meanwhile, the only grandmother I ever knew, dad's side, she applies to Cornell. No, she applies to several schools for my father who wanted to study architecture, but she'd never met him. Maybe they had some paper correspondence. I don't really know, but she applies on his behalf because she came from a very prominent family. Yeah. And she would later tell the story about how Harvard had the temerity to reject her son. But Cornell admitted him. And so dad shows up at Cornell speaking virtually no English. And he meets mom, who was selling tickets to an international student ball in the student union. Oh
my gosh. Okay.
So anyway, just
very fun.
That's a little background of how we all ended up at Cornell.
And then your father ended up being an architect.
So under New York state law, there's a licensing board, There's a very famous article that's on the front page of the New York Times real estate section in December of 1974, where Dad sort of flouted the licensing regulations of New York State because he said, if I'm just an architect, I don't retain control over the quality of workmanship or even over the materials that are used. And so he gave him a thumb, and he called himself a designer builder. And people would complain to the licensing board every so often. We got these threatening letters, but they really couldn't do anything because he wasn't calling himself an architect. Other people were. But he was designing these tremendous estates and supervising every aspect of them, sometimes doing 5 projects simultaneously.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, fun. I can tell you, I remember there were multiple times when I was growing up where my father would be in a lawsuit because the engineer decided to cut corners, and they decided to.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, someone made the decision to your point about having no control over the materials. He was the architect on like a huge hospital building, and they decided not to put a certain beam in or to change out one of the material used in some support structure. And then he would be sitting there because there was a collapse in the roof, and he's like, this wasn't my decision. I drew plans for this. You guys did not follow those plans. Why am I here? Because you decided to cut corners. So it was very smart of your father to anticipate that and mitigate that risk for himself.
Yeah. So that happened. So there's a total of, if you Google, his first name was Vuko, V like Victor, UKO, and my last name is on the screen here. If you Google Gligor Tashkovich houses or homes and click on Google Images, you'll see most of them.
Yeah.
Spectacular estates.
Oh, fun.
There's about 50, 53, 58 of them, something like that.
Yeah, very neat. So let's get back into your story. So now we know your origin story, but I want to go back to, I think this is absolutely incredible. You lobbied British Airways to serve Macedonia.
Yes.
And then it became their most profitable inter-European line. Like you had
sounds like your experiences, actually.
What?
Well, your experiences of creating enormous profit from opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I one master to another. I think this is amazing. So could you just walk us through what this was like? Sure.
Wow, it was a long time ago. 1999. Yes,
1994.
Oh, I started in 94. It took me 5 years to convince him.
That's dedication. I don't know if I'd have the patience for 5 years of convincing someone.
Well, it was, over a period of time. It wasn't daily, but so how'd that happen? So British Airways flew to Sofia, Bulgaria. The only Western airlines that flew into Skopje, the capital of the Republic of Macedonia, were Austrian Airlines and Edelweiss, which is sort of a vacation holiday charter airline of what was then called Swiss Air. That was pretty much it. And the only people who could afford those tickets were Westerners. So Macedonians, which were the third poorest country on the European continent, they couldn't afford those plane tickets to go out. Only sort of consultants and diplomats and business people could go in. Right, could go in. And Macedonia was double to triple the price of flying into Sofia, Bulgaria. So I took BA from New York to Sofia and then drove 3 hours over the mountains to get to Macedonia. Okay. When I was traveling, because it didn't make, for the cost savings and the time, it didn't make sense to spend triple. Yeah. So I knew BA very well from flying back and forth from New York to Sofia, and I did it 1 year, 94, I did it 10 times in 1 year. And most years I did it anywhere from 2 to 6 times a year. So, I've done, at this point in my life, over 270 round trip tickets over the North Atlantic Ocean.
You've been to quite a few countries. You've been to how many now?
I think it's 111.
I've been to 50. I have a long way to catch up.
I'm also older than you. It's okay. In the fullness of time, I'm sure you'll catch up. I have no doubt. So So back to British Airways. So I said we need access. Zurich Airport and Vienna airports at the time were really third-tier airports in Europe. Today, you could argue they're first tier.
Okay.
Because they're enormous today compared to what they were 30 years ago. Absolutely colossal, multiple times larger than they were then. Back then in the 90s, they had 2 terminals each, literally. And now they have like 8 or 10 or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I wanted Macedonia first world connections. So that meant London, it meant Paris, Amsterdam, maybe Frankfurt. But I mean, there are only a few. There's just a few airports that have that kind of ability to get you anywhere from there, right?
Yeah.
One change of planes. And so I picked British Airways because I knew them best. I'd phone them so often. And so I found the right person. And they're like, oh, that's great, but we need to build a business case. And the only way you can do that is to hire people to stand at the airport and talk to the passengers and see where they're going. We need to know how many people are going to which destination, or to just make a business case for justifying flying a plane to Macedonia. And so I had people collect that data for me took some years because you had to have multi-year data, right? And then presenting that to British Airways, saying, okay, look, they're going to Australia, they're going to New York, they're going just into Europe to Germany or whatever, but I can show that there is demand for this. You can provide that one-stop connecting service. And so they didn't even have the kindness to let me know that they were going forward with this after I presented it. And I saw the press release.
Oh my God.
And I'm like going, you idiots, you're going to try and start service in Macedonia without like talking to me?
Wait,
I mean, really, they're idiots.
for 1 second and tell everyone what your title was at the time of this. You were in charge of the
So the first president of Macedonia, with whom I sort of shared a name, his name was Gligor Tashkovich. And he was a younger contemporary of my grandfather. He named me the economic development representative for Macedonia. And it was an unpaid thing with a fancy business card.
But you were also in charge of economics and air traffic control as well?
No, this was many years later.
Later, okay.
2006, 2008, we're talking 94, 99 timeframe now.
But to the point though here, you were one of the top most powerful politicians in Macedonia, and they don't bother to let you know that.
No. I was just a 20-year-old kid, 25-year-old kid. I was young.
Oh, okay.
Politician part started in 2006. Sorry. 2006.
Okay, got it. So you were okay, got it.
Just a very energetic 12-year-old in the room, just like you were.
Listen, youthful enthusiasm gets a lot done for this world.
It does indeed. So I called up the airline to get the name of maybe I got from the press release, I got the name of the manager who was opening up the route. I called a few hotels in Skopje because there were only a few that were worth staying in if you were a Westerner. And I found him and I said to him, you're crazy. I said, you're going to start this and you're not going to you've never stepped foot in the country before. You have got no connections. How are you going to pull this off when everything is based on relationships?
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm going to fly there. And when you have a problem, and you will have a problem, you will come to me and I will fix it for you.
Okay.
And so at one point, I think the service is supposed to begin on Monday. And it was like Wednesday, 5 days earlier. And he was absolutely off his rocker, this guy. He said, I give up. I can't make this work. If you have till Monday. If you can make it work by Monday, we're going to fly. Otherwise, we're killing it. We're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've waited 5 years for this. You think I'm going to let you kill it? My dead body, right? So the first problem was the Brits did not know that Skopje Airport was so busy that we were slot controlled because we had a lot of military aircraft coming in and coming out.
Oh.
So what you have to remember about this time of year, it was When was this? It might have been, God, just off the top of my head now, unless my CV says it. But I think it was like October of '99. And for the last 5 or 6 months or so, there was a whole bombing campaign taking place against Kosovo and Serbia by NATO.
Yes.
And so we had all these military aircraft flying in and diplomats and, negotiators and stuff like that. And the airport was slot controlled. Literally, when it comes to British Airways, thought, oh, well, it's just Macedonia. We can fly anytime we want. We're slot controlled in the UK. They have to take whatever time we can send a plane. Right.
Yeah.
And so the guy was like, there's no slots. I can't bring a plane in here.
Oh, God.
And so I went to see Mr. Vanya Bitoianu. Mr. Bitoianu, who might even still be alive today, but I think only barely at this point, had a bad eye, was contemptuous of most people, and was kind of evil looking, maybe, let's say. You didn't see him crack a smile. He looked like he was going to hit you with a baseball bat at any moment, and I walked to his office. I'd known him because at that point he was director of civil aviation, but before that he had been head of PAL Air Macedonian Airlines, which is no longer in business. And I got him on all of the international computerized CRS systems, computerized reservation systems, which there were 5 globally, like WorldSpan and Sabre and a few others, and Amadeus in France and so on. And I remember carrying literally contracts, probably close to 2 feet of paper, to Macedonia for him to sign so that his airline could be listed on the system so that any travel agent in the world could sell tickets on his airline. Because otherwise, he just had, I don't remember exactly, let's say a dozen Macedonian in the diaspora who were selling tickets for him. All cash business. So in exchange for that, I got free air travel on PAL Air Macedonian Airlines. And so I got to know Mr. Bitoianu pretty well, and he respected me for my effort in helping. It didn't cost him anything, and I was making him more money, right? So now this is over. He's now director of civil aviation, and I'm in his office. And I'm like, so I hear you gave the guy from British Airways a hard time. And he's like, those idiots, they have no idea. I mean, he had nothing nice to say about them. He didn't have nice things to say about most people, right? So, and so he takes his printout, those big big fan fold computer printout, really thick like this, the long size, big thing. And he literally throws it at me from across a big circular table we were sitting at, right? He goes, here, he said, if you can find a place for your plane to land and take off, you've got it. This is a schedule every minute of every day of every aircraft coming out of Skopje Airport. You find the slot, it's yours. We don't have it.
Oh my gosh.
And I said to Mr. Bitoianu, I said, computers are only as smart as the people who program them.
Yeah. Same with AI today. Yeah.
Which is right, exactly, which is often not properly understood. And I said, I will find the slot. And I sat there at this big circular desk while he went on with his day for, I don't remember, at least an hour, maybe 3. I don't really remember how long it was, but it was long enough. And I went through every page. And I found a slot where they could come in at like 7 o'clock at night and leave at 8 o'clock at night. Or maybe it was 9, something like that. But there was, with a very small delay, it could work.
Okay.
And he agreed. I found it. He said, I promised you could have it. It's yours. You can have it. So I told British Airways. And they said, well, to make the whole slot control thing work, we're going to have to pull back from Skopje Airport and sit for an hour on a tarmac so that there's a slot available at Gatwick when we land at the other end.
Okay.
So that's how it worked for like the first 6 months, the autumnal season, because there's a fall and spring timetable for airlines. So we're just into the fall timetable by a few weeks, and so that's how there was a 1 hour scheduled delay on all flights going to the UK.
Yeah.
And because of the war, that was, as you read, the most profitable route for British Airways in Europe for, I guess, 5 years or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
filled with high paying diplomats and consultants and military attaches and whatnot.
I think it's funny how there's certain things that can only be done by a young person, because some of these older decision makers, they're so jaded and they've been betrayed so many times that when a young person comes in with the fire in their eyes and a vision, they're motivated by it. And so they give you the benefit of the doubt because they realize your desires are somewhat egalitarian and noble and genuine. You're not there to destroy anything. You're there because you believe in economic empowerment.
Right. And I didn't get, what did I get from British Heritage? I was hoping to get free flights. I didn't. But I did bend them over the barrel to give me free chauffeured car service from Gatwick and Heathrow Airport. So I'd fly into Gatwick, they'd give me a car to go to Heathrow, and I think I got it like 5 times. But yeah, that was the extent of it.
Yeah, that's funny. That's very funny. That's what I'm doing in real estate right now in a nutshell. And people are like, "How are you getting this?" And it's like, well, because they know that like my goals with putting these specific players into specific markets is a genuine goal. But yeah, it's interesting to see how you use those same chess pieces to create one of the most profitable inter-European routes for an entire airline.
Well, so let me just jump over that to keep on the same topic. So in November of 2007, I was in a hotel suite in Budapest, Hungary, meeting with the top executives of what today is the 3rd largest low-cost carrier in Europe, and it may even be bigger than that, called Wizz Air.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I brought Wizz Air to Macedonia, and what was significant about that was that we negotiated for them to actually base planes in Macedonia and have a local Macedonian staff to serve them, steward and stewardesses, and that allowed for the first time ever in the history of the country people to travel and see Europe, for 25 euros each way. They could not afford 400 euro tickets or more.
Yeah.
They could afford 25 euros. And so I was very, very proud of that because every Macedonian I know has flown on Wizz Air at some point, and they've gotten to see part of the world they never could have seen without that.
Can you walk us through, you attracted nearly 1 billion euros in foreign direct investment and created 1,200 jobs.
Yes.
Can you walk us through how you did that?
Sure. So I was the Minister for Foreign Investment in Macedonia. It was the number 6th ranked position in the country after a prime minister and 4 deputy prime ministers, each representing a different coalition partner in the government.
Okay.
And I was first among equal of all the other ministers.
Okay.
And there were actually 2 times during my term when I was the most senior person on the ground in the country.
Okay.
Everyone was off traveling somewhere. So I was like, I'm in charge now. Pretty funny.
Yeah.
But unlike the West, where a bureaucracy demands that when you leave, you have to turn power over to somebody else, like the president's going to be wasted, the VP's in charge kind of thing. You get like these memos, inter-office memo or something like that. Mm-hmm. None of that happened. They just left, and there was no coordination about who was in charge on the ground. And on these 2 occasions, I realized everyone was gone except for me, and therefore I better be available.
Oh, funny. So they kind of just left you there, and you're like, hello? Okay. Yeah.
Here, hello.
Guess I'm in charge now.
So, that was funny. Sorry, the question was.
You were going to walk us through your experience with.
Yes, the job, right? So, do you want to hear how I got the job?
Yeah.
Or just what's that?
Let's start with how you achieved this, and then go to how you got the job.
Okay, fine. So, first of all, I had the choice of hiring staff that would be junior, but to your earlier point, energetic and visionary, right? Or I could have taken existing government bureaucrats, because they were bureaucrats.
Mhm.
That would be a fair description. And have them join my cabinet. But the problem was the process of attracting foreign investment anywhere is generally a 4 to 6 year window.
Yeah.
And this government was working on a 4-year term in the best circumstances, right? Because in a parliamentary democracy, if the opposition has a chance to call a vote of confidence and it wins, your government collapses. And with that, probably everything you were working on, right? Because the transition of power is something we take for granted here in the West, but in Eastern Europe, it's not really a thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of realized I had to do this as quickly as possible, as humanly possible. And so I ended up working what I call Wall Street hours, which basically were 14 hours a day, Monday to Friday, which, because of time zone differences and where I was trying to attract business from, meant I was working from 10 a.m. until midnight every day. And on the weekends, I was there from 12 noon to 12 p.m. at 12 midnight.
Yeah.
So those are my hours when I was in Skopje. When I was traveling, which was more than half my time, I would typically have as many as 10 to 13, 14 meetings a day.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I in the beginning, I started going to people. Later on, I got smart and had them come to me. But still, it was grueling and long but really interesting. I had a really great time. I mean, I really liked my job. I was the kid in grade school who won all the competitions for pancake breakfast tickets, for flower seeds, for magazine subscriptions, all that stuff, right? So here I was doing it on a much bigger stage.
Okay. Yeah.
So I ended up deciding to pick the younger team of people for my cabinet, because the older team of bureaucrats that I had the choice of would have insisted on leaving at 4 o'clock every day sharp, come hell or high water, no matter what was happening.
Yeah.
And so I told everyone that interviewed for the job, I said, you have to understand something. If you want to leave at 4 o'clock, this is not the job for you. When I'm here in the country, we're going to work, 10 p.m., midnight. We're going to work around the clock to get this done. And when I'm not here and you're not traveling with me, you can work, lesser hours, maybe till 6 or 7 or something like that. You text me, let me know when you're done, and I'll give you permission to leave. But I mean, but we need to have the phone manned at least, 1.5 person, 12 hours a day has to be manned at least 12 hours a day for incoming calls and stuff like this. And so it's just really important that you understand that we're going to make this fun. You're going to travel the world. You're going to stay in great hotels. You're going to learn how to fly on a plane and go through customs and immigration. I mean, these people hadn't left the country.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And they're now in their 20s and they're college educated as well.
Yeah.
And so every 6 months, the prime minister would call me into his office. I had a counterpart as well. And he'd have on a piece of paper January, February, March, April, May, June, and 2 columns, me and the other guy in the line. And he'd say, I want you to go to these countries each of these months. Here, go.
Okay.
I go back to my cabinet and I'd say, staff meeting. Like, here are the countries going in the next 6 months. Who wants to go to Dubai? Who wants to go to Finland? Who wants to go to, whatever, Africa, whatever. And so people signed up in my cabinet, and then they were responsible for putting together a 3 to 5 day visit, fully agended, fully, full agenda every day. I picked the flights, I picked the hotels, and then off we went, and we did it. And we met with, let's see, what was those numbers again? I met with about 1,400 C-level executives in 40 countries, some of which I visited 10 to 15 times each, specifically countries like Austria and Turkey. And I Of those 1,400, I convinced 300 of them to visit Macedonia.
Okay.
And I remember one early on in this process, I think it was probably a month or 2 months in, I had a top executive from a water company, Italian water company, maybe it was French, I forget. But anyway, they were there, and we were at a nice restaurant on top of Mount Bodno, which was also a converted church. And he's taking a phone call outside, but it's still out in the air, words travel. And I could hear him say to whoever he's talking to, "You'll never guess where I am because I'm in Macedonia." It's like, "What are you doing in Macedonia?" It's like, "Well, they want us to do business here, and they've been very, very nice to us."
Yeah.
And that was the key thing. So I arranged VIP service at airports where we had a car and driver meet the plane at the gate, not the gate, on the tarmac, right? And whisk them into VIP and stuff. And we had someone from my office and who acted as an interpreter and a guide, and we had an agenda for them. And a car and driver, a nice Mercedes or something. And we took them around to all their meetings and everything. And at the end, they had a meeting with Deputy Prime Minister to get debriefed. And then they flew home after usually a day or two. And if I was in town, I took them out for a dinner or a meal or whatever. But the point was that they were flabbergasted. Everyone who came was flabbergasted. Like, we've never had treatment like this in any other country in the world. We love it here. It's great. You guys are terrific, right? So I said, great. Now tell all your friends. So we had 300 of these visits over 2 years. And the part I'm really proud about was that my cabinet was the first multi-ethnic cabinet in the country's history. Serb, Vlach, Roma, Macedonians, of course, Canadian actually, and the Macedonian as well. But I mean, the point is that we were a very disparate group of people. Oh, ethnic Albanian, sorry. That was my chief of staff, Armir. But I was the first person who was a chief of staff that wasn't my ethnicity. And people talked about that for 2 years. And I said, I said to them, I said, "You're building the future of your country." These are all people like in their mid-20s. "You're building the future of your country," I said. "You have to learn how to work together, because there's too much political rhetoric that keeps you apart."
Yeah.
And and very quickly, I watched them hand off assignments to each other and cover for each other and stuff like this. It was magical. It was absolutely magical. And we were like this dream team that just got anything done that we had to get done to make sure the potential investors got in and got out and had a great time.
Yeah.
We were all problem solvers par excellence in a country where bureaucrats ruled the day, and they left at 4:00, no matter what crisis was happening, right? So, very, very pleased about that. In fact, there was at one point, I think, also in those first couple of months, there's a front page photo of a government building at 2:00 in the morning with one light on, and the headline was, "Minister Tashkovich is working for you."
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and
wow.
I remember that because back then, before January, when I started the hours I just told you, I was literally trying to do everything. And I never pulled an all-nighter 6 years at Cornell, but I was finding myself pulling all-nighters frequently in this job because there's so much coming at me and I had to stay on top of. And finally, in January, when I came back from Christmas break, I said, "No, we have to structure this differently because I can't survive."
Yeah.
Really crazy. So that's how I did it. So we got, and of those 300 people who visited, I think 30 invested.
Wow. So from 1,400 down to 300 down to 30.
Mm-hmm. It's a funneling process.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you have 3 securities licenses.
Oh, let me just tell one more aspect for that. Sorry. Back then, and I believe now it's restarted in the last year or two, there is a survey, an annual survey done by the World Bank and IMF group called Doing Business. Okay. And the website used to be doingbusiness.org. I'm not sure if it still is today. They ran into some problems like in 2018 or something, because somebody got bribed and that was really a bad thing and they killed everything. And I think they're trying to bring it back now. But it was a way for all the countries in the world to compete against each other against, I think it was 13 to 15 different characteristics.
Okay.
Like how quickly could you open up a new business in country X? And how quickly could you solve a contract dispute, through the legal system? And how quickly could you declare bankruptcy? And how quickly could you get electricity to your building and stuff like that? And there were all these metrics which countries compete against each other on, right? So when I came to Macedonia, again, third poorest country on the European continent, right? You want to guess how many days it took to form a new company?
How many?
No,
What? So when you started, I'm guessing it took, I don't know, probably a year or two?
No. That would have been the 50. Yeah, 42 days.
42. And then by the time you were finished, it took
4 hours.
Yeah. That's the US. That's the US. People are like, oh, why are there so many startups in the US? You can start a new company within a few hours.
In some states, perhaps, but in New York State, until I think fairly recently, the media had a lock on that process. And so I remember it took me 6 weeks to form my company in 1997 in New York State.
Wow.
Because there was a publication requirement. In order to activate your company, you had to place an ad in one of your choice of several authorized newspapers saying, I'm starting a company. Anybody have any objections? Of course, nobody objected. Nobody read it. But it was free ads for the newspaper. And then when those ads were printed, the media sent you back a letter saying you've met your publication requirement. Then you sent that to Albany, and then they gave you your license to begin operation.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's why they have a problem.
So yes, we got down to 4 hours. So we were competing. We were number one in the world, tied with New Zealand and Singapore. And I was really proud about that. It took us a while. It didn't happen overnight because you had to respect the bureaucracy in order to get things done. And that meant whittling away at the requirements until you got it to where you wanted to. So we had several interim phases there. Went from 42 days to 20 days to 10 days to 5 days to whatever. We got down to 4 hours because ultimately it was the issuance of the tax ID number to the investor that constituted the act of forming a company.
Okay.
Once you had a tax ID number, you could do anything you wanted.
Yeah.
Open bank accounts, whatever, right? So that's what we got down to 4 hours. And no, that's no longer the case today, I might add. But while I was there, it was.
Yeah, but that's quite an achievement, and I think that's one of you see these countries all around the world where they have slow growth or no growth, or they have financial issues. And it's like, well, how much bureaucracy do you have that is stopping innovative people from being able to start their own company?
There you go.
Like you answer that question, you solve half their problems.
Right.
So let's go to, you were the executive vice president of government and media relations. And when you worked on a $1.75 billion oil pipeline project.
Yeah, it's probably about 2.3 billion today.
Okay.
So some historical knowledge is needed here. Flashback to 1992. Bill Clinton wins the presidential elections, right? It's the economy's stupid. People remember that very famous expression from James Carville.
Yeah.
And he really turned inward. Not make America great again and not America first, but in different words, same kind of thing. He kind of pulled back from the international engagement that President Bush before him, Bush number one, had been doing, and really tried to focus on the economy in America and make it hum again. Mm-hmm. And so about that time, the Bosnian War started from 92 to 95 in Bosnia-Herzegovina, right?
Okay.
And this is a multi-ethnic, multi-confessional state like Macedonia, but larger.
Okay.
And my father saw this from New York and said, we have to give America a reason to care about the territorial integrity of Macedonia. Because with the same multi-ethnic and multi-confessional faith as Bosnia, it could go the same way if people aren't careful. It's like playing with matches.
Yeah.
Right? And so he came up with this idea of an oil pipeline that would connect the Black Sea with the Adriatic Sea and go through Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Albania, providing a high quality crude oil from the Caspian Sea to America, and therefore giving America reason to care about the territorial integrity of Macedonia and the other countries the pipeline went through.
Oh, wow. Do you know the war strategist Lutwyck?
I do. Oh, wait.
Lutwyck?
From Maryland?
I don't remember where he's from. I have his book.
He did some work in the Defense Department too, right?
Yes.
Yes, I know. Yes, I've spoken to him and actually know his wife.
Yeah, he had this famous concept where he said, if you have an enemy, you don't go after them. You give money to their enemy to go after them.
Ha!
So it seems like your father was a Lutwackian with this idea of you have to give America a reason to get involved in the war.
I think, is his first name Edward?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Right. Anyway, yeah. So that's the origin of the project, and we thought we could supply refinery. There were 2 refineries in Bulgaria at the time. A refinery in Macedonia now pretty much closed down, and there were refineries in Albania, but they were also closed down. So the idea was to provide a steady supply of feedstock to these refineries, or to allow them to be reopened. For a variety of reasons, it didn't go through, but not because of any problems actually in Bulgaria, Macedonia, or Albania. They're actually, even to this day as we speak, there's actually a law on AMBO. AMBO is an acronym for the Albanian, Macedonian, Bulgarian Oil Corporation. And there's a law in the books in all 3 countries which governs how the pipeline will be built and constructed and operated.
Okay.
And, the problem was always upstream. It was always in the Caucasus area between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea.
Oh, okay.
For any number of reasons, very different reasons, but to this day, that is why we haven't been able to build the project. It has nothing to do with the cooperation between the 3 countries or about the project itself. It's immensely profitable. It's a great project, but the banks were unwilling to finance a stream of oil coming out of that region because it could be turned off at any moment.
Yeah.
And the risks were too high financially for them.
Yeah. Which.
But in the meantime, what you have, just to give the big picture, you have the Bosphorus Straits, right, which divides Istanbul and indeed Turkey into 2 different parts, a European part and an Asian part.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bosphorus Straits takes 105 minutes to navigate end to end. And during that time, super tankers have 14 course corrections. But it's a situation, these super tankers are the size of a football field or 2, right? So, but when you turn the dial, the wheel, there's a delayed reaction before the whole vehicle turns, the whole ship turns, right? And you're trying to avoid oncoming traffic. You're trying to avoid cross-strait traffic. You're trying to avoid rocks, whirlpools, and floating restaurants.
Oh my gosh.
And Turkey lived in complete fear, probably still lives in complete fear, about having those things go through the Bosphorus Straits. Now, since then, they've built a radar network, and they strongly recommend that tankers spend $50,000 to bring a Turkish captain on to navigate through the straits and all this. And it works. There haven't been any major disasters there for probably 20 years. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, our pipeline would have taken all the pressure off of that and allowed it to go straight across the Balkans, cheaper and faster, at lower cost than going through the Bosphorus Straits, going through the Sea of Marmara, the Dardanelles, navigating through all the pleasure craft in Greece around to the open Mediterranean and out to Gibraltar.
Well, I mean, in the U.S., we also have harbor pilots.
Right. Mm-hmm. So this would be like a harbor pilot for the Straits, basically.
Yeah, it's completely logical to say, look, you're great at your job, but we need a local harbor pilot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's switch gears. I know we're almost out of time, so let's cover this quickly. You adopted, more or less, this homeless couple.
Street homeless couple.
street homeless.
Well, which, just to differentiate for your listenership, you can be homeless, you can be begging on the street, but you actually have a place to go at night. It'd be like a shelter of some sort, a city shelter. But when you're street homeless, you have nothing, and you're literally living on that street corner.
Yes. So you adopted this couple, and you said it was
Not legally adopted.
you took them under your wing.
Yes, just so your viewers are clear on that.
So there were a few parts to the story. I understand you're turning it into movies soon, but I've thought that there were a few parts that would be interesting just to bring up right now, where one of the first things in the story that you shared with me was that they didn't want a handout, they wanted a hand up.
Yes.
I love that, because there's so many philanthropic organizations that they give a handout, but they're not helping. They should be giving a hand up. Should be teaching them how to fish rather than just giving them a fish. But they fish because it makes them feel good. But it does nothing to help the other people.
Exactly.
What you did is you helped them to navigate the system, and
give them the confidence to do so after they've been rejected dozens of times.
Yes. So, and then you have something really interesting in here where you mentioned the gentleman Joseph would cunningly foil Nikki's plans for self-improvement.
Yes.
And after she was free of him, she was able to actually grow into her own.
Yes.
And become this successful artist, and she was a poet.
Right. I mean, briefly, but yes.
Did you want to just share a little bit more about this story?
Well, that particular aspect, they both have...
I don't know if you notice the parallels, but what I'm noticing is you constantly identify who the blocker is, and once they're out, you find a way for other people to reach their maximum potential. So with that cabinet, you found young people, you found a way to inspire them to reach their full potential, and an entire nation saw a benefit to it. And then years later, you took that same mindset of tenacity and removing barriers and finding healthy people and giving them the resources they needed in order to achieve their maximum potential.
That's brilliant. I want to point out that they had an 8th grade education, and that I will say quite compellingly, it requires at least a GED to navigate the streets of New York and get access to services offered by city, state, and federal authorities. And if you don't have that, you're really SOL. And they didn't. They lived on, those of you who know Manhattan, they lived on the Southeast Street corner for years after Hurricane Sandy, or Superstorm Sandy, whatever you want to call it, of 57 in Madison. And they had all kinds of problems, right? They were massively codependent, something I didn't know what that even meant until it was brought to my attention. And they had mental illness as well, but they were high functioning, and we could make it work. So what happened was, just for your viewership, I came around the corner one day dressed like this. I had a jacket, of course, and an overcoat on. And Nicole gets up from this overturned white corrugated USPS mail sorting box. She and Joseph each had their own. Joseph was listening to radio or something. She gets up. This is a major intersection, 57th and Madison. You know, there's the Trump buildings around the corner. There's Tiffany's. There's Bergdorf Goodman's. I mean, it's all happening right there, right? It's a really busy area. And the IBM building's on the other corner. She comes up to me and blocks my stride. I mean, I'm walking around the corner carrying like a salad bag and a lunch, going to my office building, which is, 100 feet away or something. And she comes up to me and she points at me. She's short, like, 5'2" or something like this. And she points at me without touching me. I stopped. And she said to me, "I don't want your money." She said, "I want your brains." And I said, thinking to myself, that's an interesting pickup line. I haven't heard that one before. And she'd go on and tell me a story about how, they would hope that somebody put $2.34 cumulatively in front of them so they could go to the Duane Reade a few blocks away and buy an overpriced container of Kraft macaroni and cheese. Then they go to Starbucks and get free hot water, and that's how they make their lunch every day, right?
Oh my God.
They were both on methadone from previous opiate abuse.
Mhm.
And they'd have to go up to 125th Street every day to get their methadone and come back down to their corner. And they actually had squatting rights. Everyone knew, the police included, that this corner, the southeast corner, 57 in Madison, was theirs. And no matter what fancy jewelry store, watch store was next door, which there was, they could not be moved.
Oh, wow.
Because that part, at least, they had figured out.
Yeah.
Respected that they had squatting rights there.
Okay.
So this was now, I guess they'd been there. I forget when Superstorm Sandy was. I think it was like in 2012 or 2013. I don't remember exactly.
I think it was 2012.
2012. And so, and this is now 2014. So 2 years or so in. And so they said, we know we're entitled to services.
Mm-hmm.
Because we talk to people, we talk to other people on the streets. They have shelter, they come here, they beg during the day, they go home at night, they have a shelter, they have a room, whatever. But we can't get this.
Mm-hmm.
We need someone smart to advocate for us who will help us get what we're entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I took Nicole to one side, the edge of the sidewalk, and I said, thinking very quickly, I said, what I was trying to do was, I had to have them have skin in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what do you ask someone with an eighth grade education to do so that they're an equal partner to all of your efforts?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was, I said, number one, you must never lie to me. If I catch you in a lie, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicole never lied to me for the 4 years we worked together.
Okay.
And number two was, I said, you must promptly return any missed call or text message.
Okay.
You can do those two things. I'll get anything you want. And we should probably end it there, and we can continue if you want subsequently.
No, so okay, so I like that. That's how you made these two requirements of them, because in my experience with homeless people, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
Yes.
And you end up draining yourself emotionally or financially doing all these things for them, and they're like a 3-year-old. And
Right.
they put everything on you, and they never get anywhere because they're not taking any ownership of it.
Right.
And here you were having them take ownership, so they were co-creators in what you were doing to help them.
Right. And they came with me, right? Nicole more than Joseph, but they came with me and we did errands together.
And you got them, not only you got them help, but you also fought for them in legal situations as well?
Oh, yeah. We had 6 over those 4 years. We had 6 court hearings, and we won 5 of them. I was very proud about that. That was considering I wasn't a lawyer, I thought that was, although Nicole kept introducing everyone as her lawyer. But I'm like, I don't have a law degree. You can't do that.
Oh, funny. Very funny.
But you know something, in these situations for this particular category of individual, if you just show up, you usually win, right? Because people have so many issues, not to mention no watch on their hand or whatever, or no alarm clock or whatever, that they often miss their court appearances. And then they're just ruled against summarily. But if you show up, just that you showed up.
And showed that you cared. Yeah.
Right. That means that you usually won.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, Minister Tashkovich, thank you so much for your time. Is there any other story that I didn't ask you that you wanted to get out?
Oh, well, I mean, we could talk for more hours. Maybe there's a part 2 coming up. I don't know. We'll see.
Yes. After your film, we can do the part 2.
Oh, the only thing I wanted to say, I mean, because you mentioned that this channel is often used by people pitching a product and something like this. I am looking for $400,000 for the film.
Okay, $400,000 for the investment for the film. Who's producing it?
Pangea Entertainment.
Okay. And the script already written?
We have, well, the document you have is the treatment, which needs to be expanded into a script, and that's what the money is going to go for. It's going to go for to pay the script writer and to create the sizzle reel, and then we'll pitch that to the Lionsgates of the world and the Sony movie pictures and Netflix and Amazon, all that, and then they will actually make it. But we need to put together, expand out the treatment to a script and the sizzle reel.
Okay, and then do you just want to share with the audience really quick? You have 3 securities licenses. What are
Yes.
they?
Yes. One is called the SIE, Securities Industry, or maybe SIF, Security Industry Fundamentals, something like that. Then I have the New York State license, and I have a Series 82 for private placements and private companies.
Okay, so you do have a financial wherewithal to know when something's a wise investment.
Yes. Hope
Yes.
so.
All right. So, ladies and gents, you have an investment opportunity, as well as quite a few history lessons here. When we have more information on this film, it will be embedded into the website for your consideration. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you all back online. Bye.
Thank you.